So engineering is about dealing with unexpected difficulties. We were just having some problems with the video feed here, but it looks like we're back on. Again, my name is Erica Lee Garcia, and I'm hosting this live to-air Google video chat. Engineering is multitasking. That's another thing. I've got my phone here. I'm tweeting on the Eng Culture hashtag, really enjoying some of the conversation and the tweets coming back. I've got Alan with me, who is facilitating our conversation on that hashtag and taking all of your answers about what engineering is. So we're exploring the topic of engineering because it's National Engineering Month, but we recognize that although we know a lot of engineering students, engineering professionals, engineering technology students, technology professionals might be interested in this topic, it's really something that everyone can participate in. Whether you have an engineering background, whether you just use the products that engineers have brought into the world through their design and building and creativity, that's pretty much everyone on the planet. Everyone's affected by engineering. So we're really happy and we welcome you, whoever and wherever you are on the planet. Again, check on Twitter on hashtag EngCulture. So I'm going to start by talking about what engineering is from my perspective. When I was young, when I first heard of engineering, I thought that it was something that was just really good for people who were into math and science, and I thought that it was hard. I really didn't hear about it until high school, and I didn't really have a sense of what it was other than it seemed sort of intimidating. And I was one of those people that, although I did have academic strength in math and science, I wasn't really motivated by just the science in itself. I really knew I wanted to make a difference. And I was really good at English as well as good at the math and physics and things. So I found that even though I wasn't sure it would work out this way in the beginning, engineering to me is a place where I belong. And it's a place that I've been able to sort of carve out my identity as someone who cares about people, someone who wants to do things better, someone who really enjoys a challenge and taking apart a problem and figuring out how to do things better. And I'm really happy to be facilitating this conversation with all of you. I would also say engineering is experimenting. We are definitely experimenting here tonight and having a few technical difficulties. I'm just jumping into the Twitter stream as well, so I can follow along with what everyone's saying, because we're interested in what you have to say. So, when was it that you first heard about engineering, and what was your first impression, and did it turn out to be true? Maybe what turned out to be true and what didn't. So tweet your answer back at us for on hashtag EngCulture. So it looks like we're talking a little bit about how EngCulture can have an element of peer pressure in it, and the culture needs to adapt through the years to be more inclusive. Emily, I could not agree with you more on that. I think that I used to feel that engineering was really sort of exclusive, and you had to be a certain type of person, and it was something that, you know, I took that as a challenge, but I think a lot of people might have been intimidated, and a lot of people that could be really great engineers that just don't have the desire for whatever reason to take on something that they don't feel they belong in. You know, we're losing a lot of great talent, so definitely agree about the inclusiveness of the culture. I know when I first showed up as a young engineer, fresh out of school, really eager to make my mark, the very first thing that I heard, you know, coming out of the interview was, "We don't know why you want to be here," and it took me a while to figure out what that meant. I think it meant we don't get you. You know, you're a female, and females aren't supposed to be into this stuff. You know, engineering's supposed to be a guy thing, and they weren't trying to be prejudiced, I don't think, and they certainly weren't, you know, they weren't insulting me personally because they didn't know me. They just felt that it didn't make sense to them. Whereas I think, you know, lately I've been working, had a career going for just over a decade now. I hear more and more people saying, you know, we're so glad you're here, and these are some of them are even the more conservative engineering type people that you wouldn't think would be so supportive and so excited about having that type of diversity in engineering. So I do see that culture changing from my own perspective, and we certainly see a lot of great work going on. Certainly Engineers Canada, National Academy of Engineers in the States, the UK Tomorrow's Engineers is doing some amazing work to inspire a really diverse group of young people, including, you know, any gender, any background, different personality types, to get involved in engineering, because that's definitely going to have a benefit for all of us. So let's just look at the next question then. So so the first moment that you learned what engineering was all about, I guess for me, I was in high school, which I think is certainly too late. I think it's much better if we can help children understand when they're a little bit younger and they've still got that curiosity, that open mind. They're maybe not so self-conscious, but they're ready to try things out and go for it. That's really, you know, a great time to inspire them to see if they might want to be an engineer in the future. And I think my initial impression that engineering was all about math and science was correct to a certain extent, because we certainly do need those technical problem-solving and analytical abilities. But we also need a lot of other abilities as well that I don't think I knew that when I was in high school, and certainly until I started working. You know, you really need to be able to talk to people. You need to be able to win people over, relate to them, understand different levels of a problem. It might make sense to do something from a business perspective, but maybe not so much from a technical perspective, and there's always that sort of ongoing managing of tension. So I found that really interesting to learn about. And also that there's creativity and there's a certain practicality to what you do in the workplace that is maybe not there in engineering education as it stands today. You know, I've listened to a lot of Dave Goldberg, who's the founder of Big Beacon, author of A Whole New Engineer, talk about how we're trying to educate 21st century problem solvers using a 1950s educational system, and how we really do need to update that, how we need new skills and new emphasis to be placed on different things in order to prepare people to solve the toughest problems of the 21st century. So I think changing the culture and thinking about the culture of engineering is a really great place to start. So engineering is all around us. It impacts our daily lives. I think that's one thing. You know, it was this mystery to me until I turned about 15. What is engineering, and what does it mean? What is it about? I didn't really know, so I didn't have that idea. But but you know, it is something that affects all of us, and I think I always had that curiosity to figure out where things came from. So Alan, can I just get you to send me the link to the questions again? I'm having a hard time finding it. I might have it here. This is the improvisational part. Engineering is improvisation. That's what another possible way to answer that question. So here we go. Okay, I've got it. Thank you. Perfect. Thanks. So next question. Is there something that you'd like the public to know about engineering that they don't know already? So Alan, are you just on question number 2? Yeah, looks like you might be on question number 2. So I think I already answered it for myself. Let's see what people are saying about which of those impressions turned out to be true. Engineers were heroes back in the day. Michael says his first impression was engineers are heroes, they can get us to other planets. That's amazing. I just heard a radio program about how there was so much marketing that went into winning the space race and convincing the public that that was important so that they would support a government putting lots of money into, you know, the race to put a first man on the moon, for example, back in the 60s. And how since then space and technology and engineering, you know, aerospace have really come to be equated with our society's search for the unknown, our sense of adventure, and how engineering is sort of at the forefront of that because of the technology piece and the fact a lot of astronauts are engineers. So that's really neat. Engineering is let's see some other answers we're getting here. Engineering is a balance somewhere between arts and engineering culture. Well, I think that's really interesting to think that those two things are different from each other. I think, you know, back in the day, the original inventor, you know, Leonardo da Vinci was this tremendous artist as well as this inventor. He really embodied both sides of the spectrum. And we had this idea of Renaissance engineers and sort of bringing them back with this more complete balance of what engineering is about. So I think, you know, to a certain extent, back to the question, my first impression of engineering was that maybe just a certain type of person could do it, that there was this sort of engineering type. And I think that that's proven not to be true at all, really, that the engineers are, and you know, people who work in technology are this really diverse group of people. They're motivated by all different things. They have different strengths. They do all kinds of cool stuff on their downtime, you know, everything from volunteering to rock climbing to you know, circus trapezing. I know engineers that are into you know, music, into podcasting, into sports, into the maker movement, building stuff. They're really this diverse group of people, and that's a great thing for our profession, to have that diversity, because it means we're bringing so many fresh ideas together, and we're able to collaborate on the toughest problems that we're facing, and we're able to create technology that works for everybody. I heard a thing recently that said that the reason that women get into more accidents than men, and I'd like to see the data on this personally, because I'm not sure it's true. Maybe more of an urban legend. But anyway, the anecdote as it went was that men don't have as many accidents as women because cars were designed by men for men. And men tend to be a little bit taller. They can, you know, they have a certain perspective as they're sitting in the driver's seat. Women in general tend to be a little bit shorter, so they can't actually see as well. They don't have the ability to navigate the car with the same precision, through no fault of their own. The technology is just not designed for them. And I thought that was a really interesting question. It is a design flaw if that is actually true. I'm not sure it is, because what about tall women? But anyway, we do want to have that diversity. We want to have different perspectives coming together in engineering, and feeling, you know, that we can really respect and embrace diversity within the engineering field. So we often see engineers, you know, following many different paths, working in many different industries. I think one thing that I thought initially, you know, because I was told, oh, electrical engineers do this, mechanical engineers do that, materials engineers do this, I thought that everything was sort of neatly organized. I mean, in my sort of 15-year-old brain of how the world worked, I figured that everything was very sort of carefully organized, and when you went out, you would work on one particular type of problem in one particular company, and you'd just be like this little cog that fit into a wheel, and it would be just all very straightforward. I learned that the real world, and thank goodness, because that would be really boring if it was the way I thought it was, the real world is much messier and more interconnected than that. I mean, we do have these disciplines, we have these specializations in these companies, in these industries, but really it takes a little bit of all kinds of different things to solve problems and to make the world move forward. So I think that that was something that turned out not to be true. Alan, you can go ahead with the third question if you like. I'm just sort of filling in time till we're ready to go. Is there one thing you'd like the public to know about engineering? And I guess we could say this about engineering and engineering technology, that they don't know already. I think this is something I spend a lot of time thinking about, so I'll maybe wait to see a couple of your answers, see how they come in, because I think it's a really important question. We sometimes, you know, as engineering professionals, we're so excited and passionate about what we do. We love to solve problems. We love to make things better. We're not always aware of how people around us, either our immediate family or someone in the greater community, or our colleagues that aren't engineers, that don't have that technology background, sort of how they're perceiving what we do. And I think until I started working on the National Engineering Month campaign, I hadn't thought too much about it. Like, what's the problem? I mean, you either get it or you don't. Why does it matter what the public thinks about us, and why should that be a part of our priority? And I wonder if that's a little bit of a function of eng culture that just says, well, just get it done. It doesn't matter what people think. You know, the public opinion is sort of this this softer thing that doesn't really hold any weight. But I think that something I've understood lately is that the way that engineering is understood or not by the general public and by young people really is important, because it influences the way that people interact with technology, whether they're really intimidated by it. You know, there's the classic example of someone who doesn't know how to program their VCR clock. They're sort of frustrated by technology. When there isn't a good fit between technology and, you know, engineering designs and the general public, we tend to get a lot of failures. We see preventable medical deaths. We see people getting into accidents. You know, time was every other flight that they were, you know, in the very early days of aviation, every other flight would crash into the runway. And that wasn't good, really. And maybe the technology wasn't so robust then either. But there was another factor. There was also the fit between the mental model of the pilot, the human, and the machine, and how it was working together. So today's aviation aircraft are obviously much, 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 much safer, and they've improved on that sort of fit between technology and the person. And they've also, you know, they've got much better technology. So I think part of our culture, to bring it back to our hashtag EngCulture, is that we need to care what people think. We need to care what the public understands. We need to get over this idea that, well, we know and we're the only ones that matter kind of thing, that it is worth it to take the time to explain things to your neighbor, to your little cousin, to, you know, say someone in your community who doesn't have a technical background. Find ways to sort of use language and use examples that they're going to be able to relate to, because the more they find themselves invested and able to understand and interact with engineering, that's really, you know, the better off we're all going to be, because they will be able to engage with engineering, engage with technology in a way that's more successful, and you know, we'll also get you know, sort of more credibility and more recognition for what it is that we do and the value that we deliver. So is there one thing about engineering that I would like the public to know? Let's see. Emily says, this is good, I'm getting some different questions, some different answers here. Engineers need to be creative. Both industry and education are changing to reflect this. Yes, absolutely. And I think this is not a new thing, although you hear sometimes the acronym STEM, which is science, technology, engineering, and math, sort of the collective name for those technical jobs. They're all sort of schmooked together. Sometimes we hear the acronym STEAM with arts added into the middle. So that's a great example of how we're starting to recognize that we don't have science and art as two separate disciplines, that they really are and need to be interconnected. And we certainly, you know, I guess one thing I would like people to know is that it's not that one thing is better than the other. I think sometimes, you know, maybe it's meant in fun, but in an academic or university setting, certainly there's a lot of rivalry between the disciplines, between different faculties, and sometimes even between the different types of engineering. You know, they say, oh, this type of engineer is better than that type of engineering. Really, I think we need to get away from that, just to say that we're all interconnected. We all need each other. We all bring different strengths to the table. And that culture of inclusiveness and recognizing the validity and the value of interdisciplinarity is huge. So there's a comment here from Mark that says we're engaging fewer STEM folks, especially engineers, than many of our competitor nations in USA. Not sure about Canada. So I think he's referring to the fact that we're not attracting enough youth into these STEM professions. And you hear a lot about that, especially, I don't know if you know, Neil deGrasse Tyson is a very well-known physicist who talks a lot about how these innovations, say something driven by a mission to Mars, or back in the day it was a mission to the moon, you know, we keep going further and further, that drives technology that comes back to us on Earth, and that is really important. So it's not just about what happens in these exploratory space missions, for example, but it's the breakthroughs that we need in order to get to Mars that then turn around and become the next the next material for a smartphone, or the next mechanism for a pacemaker that everyone ends up using, that becomes the new standard. That's much, much better than the old version. So competitiveness and innovation and engineering and technology are certainly all sort of inextricably linked. And I think a lot of people have that as, we need more of that. And certainly I think there's an argument to be made that we need the right number of people in the right positions. I would say that it's good to have people in. They need to be in the profession because they also enjoy it. I think personally that's a really important thing, that you're not just motivated by maybe making money necessarily, or, well, this is important, or I think I'm gonna I think this is going to make me prestigious, or, meanwhile you don't really like it. It's important to be a member of something you believe in. That's my own personal credo. So the next question here we've got, how would you explain what engineering is to a young person? All right, well, my two favorite things to say on this subject, and I very rarely go off script, is that it's about changing the world and helping people. Those are the two things that I think are really important that people know. And it's not a technical explanation. It's not maybe a way of talking about engineering that we're used to using. We're used to being very descriptive and very analytical in our answers, but I really think help people change the world. It's explaining it in a way that people can relate to. I think often we use the objects around us to explain about engineering. Hey, how about this smartphone? That was engineered. Hey, how about the smartwatch that you're wearing, or the public transit you took to work today, or the water that you turned on the tap and drank without thinking about it this morning. That's a really great way for people to understand, the things all around us and how they, just how influential they are. And I think it's exciting when you can do a little bit of storytelling, and talk about whether it's an old example like Thomas Edison inventing the light bulb and failing so many times but then finally getting it right, or maybe even Henry Ford figuring out the first assembly line and how that was a totally radical notion at the time, to organize a process in that way, and now it's something we very much take for granted. A lot of people are fond of talking about Steve Jobs, or talking about these sort of people who seem to really break through. I think it's exciting when you can look at the way something used to be, and then someone had an idea, and then it changed everything, and how that sort of moved everyone forward, and the impact that had. I think there's a certain type of individual that's very motivated by that, and that's very exciting. So great. Okay, I'm going to move to the next question here. How does experiencing what engineering is differ from the student culture to the working culture? So I touched on this a little bit earlier. I feel like the engineering is, when you're in school, is more like it's something that's hard to do. It's maybe seen as kind of prestigious. And it's something that's really seen as like it's a challenge, and you're maybe sort of keeping yourself going. You're really just trying to get through it because there's so much to learn academically. It's a tough thing to do, and I think that a lot of us are really motivated by that challenge, as I said, but maybe don't have our eyes on the prize of ultimately what we're doing. I think a lot of us, I'll speak for myself as an engineering undergrad, didn't really have a sense of where all this was leading to. I learned a lot of abstract problem solving, a lot of math and science. There was a little bit of design, a little bit of project management, a little bit of context setting, but we were so sort of bogged down academically by the things that we were learning that it was really hard to, to connect any of that, or to really sink into the greater, wow, I'm going to help people, or wow, I'm going to change the world. Those sort of more values-based, more emotion-based realizations. I think that's something that's really we just didn't have time to do it, basically, or we didn't value it in the same way, which again maybe comes back to the culture. So that's I think one thing that's different. When you're in the workplace, at least for me, it was about getting things done. It was about fixing the problem, talking to people lots, figuring out how people would feel about moving forward on a problem, convincing people to get on the same page or to open their minds to the fact that maybe they thought something and that didn't turn out to be the case. That's spend a lot of time dealing with those types of issues. Certainly that wasn't present or something that we really talked about a lot during engineering education. So, you know, back to the question about, you know, explaining what engineering is to a young person, I would say it's about understanding and working with people. It's about serving people. And it's about making stuff happen in the real world. And, you know, no disrespect to the pure sciences that are doing these researches and having scientific, you know, bodies of research and having scientific breakthroughs. We absolutely need that to happen too. For me, I think my sweet spot, just being this person who loves to connect this concept of idea, we've got this model or this theory up here, and then look, we've got this thing that's actually doing stuff for people in the world. That's really exciting for me. That's sort of the thing that I think, and I'm biased because it's my piece of the puzzle, but I feel like it's the most exciting and maybe the most important. We're sort of that bridge between the theory and the reality, the idea and then the prototype that happens and ends up catching on in the real world with all the messiness and complexity that the real world has in it. So yeah, I feel like that's pretty exciting, and the right person is going to look at that and go, yeah, I want to be a part of that too. So it's really exciting. It's I think a really neat way to explain engineering, not to go into the technical detail, but to talk about the inspirational part of it. I think sometimes it's less important what you say than that you say it with a lot of passion and you say it with you know, talk about it from a personal standpoint. I think engineering can be seen as something that's very impersonal, sort of cold or logical or dry even, when really it's anything but. I mean, the stories and the things that happen because engineering is possible are really all around us. It's you know, it's what life is made up of. Mark had a point earlier about how engineering makes culture, because so many of the things, you know, the technologies and the things that have influenced and shaped the way that societies interact with each other and how, you know, how we all spend our day-to-day lives. Engineering creates culture. It's a culture maker, and I think that's a really good point. I hadn't really thought of that. We were thinking about culture more in the sense of having a culture inside of the engineering profession and looking at that as well. But it's a great point that there's this sort of interaction between engineering and pop culture, engineering and maker culture, engineering and I don't know, business culture, because of the technologies and the innovations that it makes possible. There's another part to the question here. We're on question 5. How about engineering technology versus engineering? So that's something I can't speak to directly because I'm not a member of the engineering technology culture, the engineering technology community myself, but I do know lots of technologists and I've worked with a lot of them. And I would say that there are many more similarities than there are differences. Honestly, we both want things to work. We all want things to be better. We want to get people engaged. We want to see things working more efficiently. We want better design. We want things to go well. And so we're really focused on that outcome and on creating better ways to do things, better products. And we all are just excited, really. I've seen just so many people who just love what they do and they're excited about it. They feel really rewarded by it. I would say at the educational level, there is a bit of a difference. There's more of the theory part to the engineering education, and maybe the technology is a little more practical. But that's sort of on this continuum again, where we need everybody. We need everyone from the pure scientist who comes up with the breakthrough that allows us to predict the probability of the existence of a new type of compound, or however that works. And then there's the person who sort of does the applied research, and then there are, the engineers who are working with it, to make it commercial. And then there are the people who refine it and make it better and make it systemic and make it implementable. And then there are the people who actually get their boots on the ground and make it happen, right down to the trades, sort of boots on the ground type people. And we need all of those people to work together as a team. So I think that's another key message to put out to the world, is about engineering and teamwork and how we're all sort of interconnected. So there's something coming in here. I think this is Catherine on the Canadian Women in Science and Engineering. Hi, so glad you could join us, showing the benefits that diversity has to offer innovation. I think that's such a great point. And I think the problem with diversity is that it's initially difficult. And I realize that's a little bit of a provocative statement to make, but it's true. We instinctively relate to the people that are the same as us, and we're instinctively a little bit afraid, or maybe at least a little bit suspicious of the people that are different than us. And we might equate different and bad or dangerous. And I think that's certainly what happens sometimes, in some of these social problems that we see, where we have different groups fighting against each other, where we've got one looking at the other and saying, well, you're different than me, therefore you're not okay, kind of thing. And I think it's a real mental switch to say, you're different than me, and that's great. And you think of that in the context of a team, and I hope that you all have positive working experiences when you grow up. Assuming that you're already grown up, if you're not in the workplace already, when you do enter the workplace and you end up working together with a team that has diverse skill sets. I know as a Six Sigma black belt, I knew my most successful teams were going to be comprised of the people where I had one person from each of the different departments, and everybody brought something different to the table. So I had the mechanics who actually knew how the PLC worked and they could implement the changes. I had the supply chain people who had a very good understanding of where our supplier was coming from and how their process worked. I had the finance person who could help us figure out, well, what is this problem actually costing us, and how are we going to move forward into measuring how we're going to fix it. I think you see my point. You need all of these different perspectives to come together to really solve a problem. So that was really illustrative for me. It's not just a nice politically correct thing to say about diversity is good. It is good, and it is the right thing to do to allow equity and access to many different groups of people and different learning styles. But it's also good for results and good for innovation and good for productivity and getting things done. It just takes a little bit of skill sometimes to navigate opposing viewpoints and differing skill sets. People need to be respectful, they need to be open-minded, and they need to be honest enough to talk something out. If two people have, if their diversity is causing friction, they need to be skillful in seeing how that friction can open up a new perspective rather than just battling against each other. So I think that's an awesome point. And Robin says, engineering can be seen as cold and dry when really it's anything but. Yes, exactly. I think engineering is cool. I think it's so much fun. I think a lot of people have the wrong idea about it. It's not that we need to change engineering or that we need to do anything so radically different. I think we need to tell better stories about it, and we need to do a better job of highlighting the people that are in it that have that passion and that have that different perspective. And certainly during National Engineering Month, this is a great time to explore those stories and talk to those people. So there's another quote here from Zoe. It looks like, engineering is turning science into action. Great way to describe to kids who know science class to connect the two. That's true. A lot of elementary school kids, they don't have an engineering class. They have a math class, so they know what math is. And I think something that engineers tend to do, or some engineers I know have tended to do, is to say, well, listen, kids, Engineering is math and science in the real world. And kids, a lot of the time, they're very literal. They think about, oh, math and science in the real world, therefore they imagine themselves, or they imagine a grown-up sitting at their desk writing out the times table or whatever math activity they're doing. You know, they superimpose what they know as math, including the fact that maybe they think it's kind of boring, and they think that that's what engineering is. So that's just something to be careful from a messaging perspective. When you're telling a story, understand how they're going to interpret that and where that can go. So I think, again, getting back to that skill, and really this is something I advocate for all the time, of the fact that it's so important to be able to speak skillfully about what we do. And I think that that's something, again, in our culture that we can try to create, to say it's not good enough just to be great at engineering, just to be technically capable. You really do need to be able to be a bit of a translator. You're sort of taking this complex, you know, discipline, all the great stuff that you learned in school, and all the really nice, complicated things that you know how to do, and you are able to translate them to make them work for the people. And I know lots of us are really motivated by that sort of social justice standpoint of making something that works for people, that creates a world that is just fundamentally better. It's not just technology for the sake of something that's faster or glitzier or more glamorous. It's actually something that really creates more sort of good in the world. And I think that's obviously a very subjective label, but it's also important to feel that you're part of something good in the world. And I know, again, from my perspective, I really feel like I have been able to achieve that through my engineering career, and I feel very lucky to have been a Lean and Six Sigma black belt, and then to have moved into some of the volunteer work that I did where I used my engineering skills. I really felt as though I was helping improve workplaces, I was helping save money, I was helping lessen environmental impact, contributing to more sustainable business practices, you know, when I was working in industry, and then later when I was working in my volunteer projects, that I was helping improve people's livelihoods, and that was really cool. So again, I think all the way through the different systems, the different worlds of engineering, we've got a lot of similarities. People generally, they're curious, they want to make the world better. I know sometimes they strive for certainty and for clarity. That's very comforting to people. I've heard this repeated at a lot of science outreach events that I've been to, that people are very comforted by the fact that math, you know, it's the right answer. There's one right answer, and you know, pi will always equal 3.14 or 15, whatever that is. And I expect this Pi Day is in a few days. It's going to be March 14th, 2015. It'll be pi to 4 decimals, which is, you know, depending on who you talk to, that's a pretty big deal. So hope you all celebrate Pi Day in style. But I think the search for certainty and the search for progress coming forward is something that we really have to also balance with the need to understand people and to be realistic, and to understand that sometimes there is complexity and there is uncertainty. So just a comment from Michael here about turning theory into action, or turning science into products. There can be a lot of action in science. Yeah, absolutely. Depends how you define action, I guess. I know that for me, you know, going back to when I was 7 years old, I loved digging trenches in the driveway of my parents' house. I lived in the country, so we had mud in the driveway every time it rained. This was my favorite thing ever, was to get out there and look at something and know that I shifted that. You know, I physically did something out there in the world. That was action, you know, what action or impact meant to me. And certainly to someone else, someone who's more motivated by the theoretical, by the quest for knowledge, maybe to them, you know, turning up a new theory or publishing something new is enough of a, you know, is enough of a breakthrough for them. And I think that's great. I think we need all those different types of people. It's not a hierarchy, it's a web, it's an ecosystem. We all need to go where we fit best so that we can all make the greatest contribution possible. So again, I think that sort of inclusiveness and that interconnectedness can become part of our culture. So I'm going to move into the last question, and we're just about at 9 o'clock. We got started a few minutes late, so I hope people will stick around and continue to tweet their thoughts on #EngCulture. Are there things about engineering culture that you would like to change? and what are they? So go for it. I'd love to hear your answers on this. This is our final question of the night, and then we're just going to do a bit of a wrap-up. So I think, first of all, I've touched on it lightly a few times. I think that we need to dispense with this idea that engineering is any, quote, better than any other. I think we need to sort of get this idea into our heads that all of our disciplines are needed, everybody is necessary, everyone's contribution is welcome in order for us to move forward, welcome and necessary even. More diverse leaders. Mark, I absolutely agree with you there, and I think it is about gender diversity and more access and opportunity and acceptance for women in these STEM fields. I think we could also look at, say, more acceptance of people with differing personality types, and not saying, well, there's an engineering type, and if you don't fit that, then, well, maybe you don't belong here, which is sometimes, I think, a little bit of an unspoken rule. I certainly came up against it myself in my very first engineering job of, we don't get why you want to be here. You know, you don't fit the mold. You're outgoing. You're young. You're female. You know, you just don't seem like you belong here. It was what they were saying to me. And I mean, I'm glad I didn't really understand the implications of what they were saying. I was just like, what are you talking about? I'm an engineer because I went to engineering school. This is what I do. This is what I want to do. So that was something, I think, you know, that inclusiveness and that understanding of the value of diversity and acceptance of different people who don't necessarily fit the mold is great. I would say that another thing we talk a lot about in National Engineering Month is this idea of integrating an understanding of creativity and innovation, and, you know, involved in innovation, which is this bright, sexy, shiny word that everybody loves, is the idea you're going to try a lot of things and they're going to fail. And you're going to be uncertain and confused a lot of the time. Innovation is messy. It is not something that you can just sort of plan out perfectly and have everything totally calculated and planned. You're going to need to go into modes of iteration. You're going to need to go into a sort of a vulnerable space personally to try something and know it might not work. So there's a lot involved in that sort of one simple sounding concept of innovation. And you know, it really involves opening people's minds and getting them to embrace their fear of the unknown. And learning how to bring people along with you, I think, is something that I learned, again, in Six Sigma, which is a little bit different than innovation. It's more about incremental improvement of what you've got. It's about taking a process that's working and kind of tweaking it and making it a little bit better, versus innovation, which is just disruptive change. Let's completely rethink our business model. Let's switch completely to another approach, as opposed to just sort of gradually or, you know, incrementally improving. So I think, yeah, absolutely, Robin, I agree with you. More encouragement of creativity rather than following the rules or what's always been done. And it's really ironic, I think, that we're saying we have to encourage that, since engineers are the original innovators. You know, we are the people who have brought these step changes to society throughout history, through the things that we brought forward. So I think that that's really interesting, and I agree. You know, one of the messages we're always putting forward, so that the kids, for example, who see themselves as really creative, they're going to feel really, they're going to feel welcome in engineering. They're going to feel like, hey, that's a good place for me to be. This is something I want to do. This is a place where I can belong, and they'll feel like they can. Like they can dig their heels in if they get a little bit of attitude, like I first did when I first started in engineering. It took me quite a few years, actually, to sort of plant my flag and say, no, you know what? That's nice that you think I don't belong in engineering. I know that I do. And it's amazing what happens when you get that sense inside of you, and you just feel like, yep, this is where I belong, and it doesn't matter what anyone, you know, what anyone sort of thinks. Amazing things happen when you're able to truly embrace that attitude. So I like to see more and more young people get to that place where they're confident in their choice, and they feel good about exploring engineering, even if they don't have all the details worked out yet. That there just sort of is a fundamental sense of belonging and confidence in where they are. Mark is saying respect and concern for public welfare and humanity. Yeah, great point. I think we definitely want to promote that and bring that to the forefront of saying, it's not just about making something work or it's making it work safely. I think the next level of engineering is sustainability. How can we make something that doesn't use up a disproportionate amount of resources, put a whole bunch of things back into the environment as waste, but then also how can we build a better world? Is this benefiting people? Is this fair? Is this right? I do encourage all people, no matter what their stage of their career is, whether they're just starting out or they're just graduating and considering what industry they want to work in, is this a contribution that I want to make? Is this a part of a system? Is this a system I want to be a part of, rather? Is this something that I want to pull together? So I think it's a deeply personal question, but it's not totally logical. It also has to do with the heart. And to bring things back around to Big Beacon as we close out tonight, the Whole New Engineer talks about the 6 minds of engineering. And only one of them is analytical. The other ones are all about, let's see, I don't know if I can rhyme them off the top of my head, but there's about creativity. There's about being mindful and being aware of your own mind. There's, all of these other skills that we're sort of not taught, or not taught to value, at least in our undergraduate engineering career as it is, undergraduate engineering system as it is. But in my experience, when you step into the workplace, you see how being well-rounded and having that sort of human perspective and those other skills is really necessary and really important. So great points, everybody. I am really excited and a little bit tired from talking to myself to have had you with me. I am hosting this event again on behalf of the Eng Culture Chat. We're a part of the Big Beacon Network. We're here every Wednesday at 8 p.m. There'll be a different host. We all sort of rotate through, and we speak about different topics relating to engineering, relating to education, and the future that we see as it relates to this idea of the whole new engineer. So if you enjoyed some of the topics we covered tonight, I encourage you to check us out again Wednesday nights on different hashtags, but hashtag Big Beacon is the main one that you can start with, and then you can find that certain chat every week. Again, my name is Erica. My Twitter handle is Engineer Your Life. That's Engineer YR Life. And I encourage you to get in touch with me, stay in touch with me, and join us for our next hashtag Eng Culture Chat, which will be same time, same place, May 13th. So happy Engineering Month, National Engineering Month, everybody. Hope you have a wonderful celebration wherever in the world you are. Thank you so much for your engagement, and good night.